This morning I was invited to share a reflection at Mass here in the community in Essendon. And would you believe it, but the gospel text of the day is the Beatitudes. So what I want to share with you this morning is something of what I tried to share this morning at the Mass. Jesus was up the mountain and he'd spent the whole night in prayer. And he then called his disciples and selected 12, those whom he wanted to be with him and to be sent out in his name. And then he came down the mountain to the plain where the rest of his disciples and a large crowd had gathered to hear him. So Jesus fixed his eyes on them, according to Luke. Fixing his eyes on them, he said, "How happy are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. How happy are you who are hungry, for you will be satisfied. And how happy are you who weep and mourn, for you will laugh. And happy are you when they persecute you, because your reward is great." And then he went on, of course, with the, "Alas for you who are rich, you have had your consolation. Alas for you who are well fed," etc. And to me it's like a preface or an introduction to this Sermon on the Plain that Jesus was about to give. Because it is full of contradictions and questions and so on. For example, in that Jesus says such things as, "Love your enemies, turn the other cheek, don't ask for your property from the one who's taken it from you. Be compassionate as your Father is compassionate." In other words, forgive, respect, etc. Now the Jews lived in a rather complex environment or context. They lived under what they call the Pax Romana, which meant Roman law to make everything favourable and peaceful for Rome, which included taxes and endless taxes. They also lived under the rule of might is right, and the Romans had the might, and so they called the right. And the other one is the Jewish state. In the Jewish state, an eye for an eye was the reformed law. Before it had been worse, but the eye for an eye, and we still see that today. Yeah. Or likewise, hate your enemies. And that was part of the culture. And Jesus comes in with something totally different, really against all of this. And we can sit today maybe and criticize the Romans and the Jews, but it might be helpful to have a look at our own world and our own society. And I'd just like to mention 3 areas that I think are sorely addressed by the Beatitudes. The first is our concern for money. We live in a society of idolatry. Even Francis refers to God money. And he also says, it's interesting in our society, if the stock market falls 1%, there is crisis. It's all over the news. But if 1,000 or more die of starvation, it causes just a little ripple. And that's our world, addicted to money. The other big thing, I think, in our world today, which is questioned by the Beatitudes, is power. Might is right. And I think of Tibet, an independent country that is now part of the mighty China. Or I think of Iraq, what Pope John Paul called us an unjust war for oil. And then the other one, of course, today we have the Ukraine. Putin wanted to extend the power, the influence, the might of Russia. And then, of course, we have the Sudan, where we have two warring factions, both quite powerful and causing absolute destruction. And I look at first money, and I look at how our greed for money makes so many people poor. We have a system that creates poverty. Also, when I look at power, we have any number of people mourning and weeping today in Ukraine, in the Sudan, and wherever there is war, because some people want more. And then finally, pleasure, I think, is a big one today. Pleasure. Now, I know I like, and I try and get a nice little drop of wine every now and again, a good Shiraz. But what I saw on television on Sunday night disturbed me. I'd watched The Voice and then stayed with the channel to a show called Spotlight, which I'd never seen before. And the first part was good, it was interesting. Then the second part was an interview with Richard Branson about a new cruise ship that he is bringing to Australia so that Australians will have easy access to it. And it was probably the most dehumanizing system or event that I've probably ever seen. The people on board, when a certain type of music was played, they all danced in a certain way. And when they went to the bar, they got their medicine and all behaved in a certain way. And when they were told to laugh, they all laughed. And I couldn't see at what. What were they laughing at? And it occurred to me there's probably more respect for the occupants of the cages in the Melbourne Zoo than there was for people on that boat. And that's an unbridled quest for pleasure. So from money, we have poverty. But that's not the way it'll be in God's kingdom, which is inaugurated now and is amongst us. Power, we will not have people weeping and mourning in God's kingdom, which is amongst us. And pleasure, we will not have people hungry, because some people have too much. So I just want to leave these with you. It's a way of looking at our society in the light of the Beatitudes that Jesus gave before he launched his sermon on the plain. Thanks very much. God bless you.